W update. Here's my observations, what I've seen after a few weeks of the season. We get into it next on Beyond the Locker Room. WNBA season's kicked off. We're approaching about 3 weeks into it now. Yeah, probably about that. We've seen some interesting things. Most teams have played about 5 to 7 games depending on their schedules. And I just want to give you my observations of what I've seen, after a few weeks early in the season. So we have 2 new teams in. Portland, of course, our beloved Toronto Tempo. Overall, both teams have kind of acquitted themselves well. At the time of this recording, Toronto is 3-4. Portland's at 500 at 3-3 after beating Toronto yesterday. I think to start off with the expansion teams, they both have taken different tacks. Where Portland's gone with more of a youth movement per se, and they're looking to build their system and their program mostly from the draft. It looks like. While Toronto's, I think the Tempo are looking more of like a Golden State model from last year, where they're going to get people from different parts of the world to come here, vets of different organizations, from the expansion side, from the international side, and put together a very competitive team up front. I think that the Tempo, just on their side note, because obviously I'm following them a lot closer, they went on a West Coast trip, played 4 games, and I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 nights. It was a pretty tough early schedule. 2 back-to-backs in LA. Then they played Phoenix, got a nice win there. And then afterwards, took a drubbing from Minnesota. And I think it was Sam Mitchell that mentioned this. The most dangerous games from a road trip is the last game of the road trip and the first game back from a road trip. And that seemed to be apparent with the with the sluggish in the Portland game. And then obviously they look very fatigued in Minneapolis. But overall, I think the Tempo will figure out a few things. Starting Kiki, which I think is something they should have done from day one. Some players are just meant to be starters. Some players are meant to come off the bench. She looks like she's got a starter's mentality, and she has been, she has rewarded the team and the coaching staff with her play since she's been starting. I think going into yesterday's game against Portland, she's around 15 points per game since she started. So she's showing much more assertiveness. The player that we saw at UCLA, which is fantastic to see. So that's my observations from the expansion teams. Portland, as I said before, coming at it from a different tact. Some things, let's look at some of the top dogs. Let's go in the Eastern Conference. I think the team that everyone was kind of curious to see, 2 teams, to be fair, I think people were curious to see were the Atlanta Dream and the Indiana Fever and what would happen with each one of them. So let's get in with the Dream first. The big trade just before the season started was the trade of Angel Reese to Atlanta. I think overall, she's already come up big in a game with a block shot, a game-saving block shot in the opening game. They've had some interesting moments. The only loss they had was a 1-point loss to Vegas at home, where she had a tough time scoring. It's understandable since she's playing against the reigning DPOI in that game, and Asia Wilson. I thought she acquitted herself defensively pretty well, as Asia didn't go, she didn't go ham or didn't go supernova, which she's known to do. They kept her pretty calm with just a studious 20 points that night, I believe. Of course, she's always very efficient, so she's around 50%, Asia. But I think overall, Atlanta has a really nice combination of that big 3 with Howard, Gray, and Reese. And any given night, 2 of those 3, if not all 3, could come up and bite you. I saw the other day, I can't remember who they were playing, but who were they playing the other day? Oh, Dallas. And Angel is showing a lot more of the stuff she showed late in the season last year in Chicago, putting the ball on the floor, beating slower bigs, and just kind of blowing by them. She had a really nice game. That game is kind of the typical type of game we were seeing near the middle part of last season in Chicago till the end, where she was starting to get her efficiency up and finding different ways to score, not just kind of seal-offs or putbacks. She was, she's really working off the bounce, pull-ups, shooting some 3s as well too. So that seems that as she gets more and more comfortable, I expect to see a better version of her each and every game. As I said before, Atlanta's off to a great start. They do seem like the team maybe to beat in the East perhaps, but another team that's in the Midwest might have something to say about that, and that is the Indiana Fever, who have dealt with a bunch of different types of nicks, you could say, through at the start of the season. They're 4-2 right now. And, Aaliyah Boston's back in the lineup after missing a game or 2. And, they've been all over the map a little bit, but they're figuring it out a little bit at 4-2. I would say maybe. I mean, people might say differently, but I think Mitchell's been their most consistent player overall, I think, this season. But, I think it started off a little rough for Caitlin, which is understandable since she really hasn't played much in the last year. I know she played some international ball with the U.S. team this summer, or this offseason, I should say. But she's starting to seem like she's finding a rhythm of where she could get her shots from. I still feel she could use the mid-range a lot more so instead of relying on the three. The three is still streaky, and I think that's why her offense at times can be up and downish at times because she's still hungry, hunting for that three. She's had some games where she's tossed up 25, 28 shots. Like, whoa. And I understand when Boston was, injured midway through the game, she and Mitchell, I think, went for like 53 shots that game. I get it. They got to take a lot of the shots with Boston out, but that was a little rough to watch. But overall, they're starting to figure it out, and defensively they're starting to get a bit better as the time goes on. Stephanie White, she doesn't want to bring the defense, and they're starting to get that together. So we'll see where they go. I am watching that situation closely because I'm curious to see how Caitlin integrates herself with this team after they went on a run last year without her, and I'm curious to see how that all meshes now with what Stephanie White's philosophy is, which she was able to get across the team post Clark injury, how Clark fits into this now, as we move forward with what they did last year. They were literally like a couple shots away from making the finals. I don't think people realize that or remember that, but that was the case. So it will be fascinating to see what happens there on that front and see what goes on in Indiana. The Liberty right now, they're playing at the moment, and if they win, they'll be 4-2. They're playing Dallas, but the Liberty, they're always one to watch. Stewie's kind of getting back to her old form. Last year, she had a lot of nicks as well, too. Wasn't really herself. Jonquel Jones was out for parts of the season. And that's, they're a little longer in the tooth in some areas, but in other ways, they've kind of been able to kind of replenish and make themselves younger in the backcourt a little bit more. So they made some moves to kind of make sure they can sustain this for a little longer. And I think they're trying to I think right now what we're looking at is the phasing out of Jones to some extent, where they realize she's a little longer in the tooth. Not too long, but, we're getting to that phase where, it definitely Ionescu took over the role with Stewie as like the top two folks. And I think that's how they're now as a big two more than a big three. We'll see if that continues as the season goes on, but the Liberty's always, going to be in the mix. So to me, they look like the three top teams right now in the East. The Sky made a lot of improvements. They're at 500 at the moment. Skylar Diggins and unfortunately Rikia Jackson getting hurt. That was a real tough loss. They have a lot of other players they brought on board too. So the Sky should be a little more competitive, and they're a team to watch, as well as Washington. That's a fun young team to watch. Citron and those girls there, man. Kiki, Ifrin, that's a nice team to watch, Washington. So watch for them. Of course, the young Canadian from MTL, Prosper. So that's a fun team to watch as well too. And I already mentioned, in Connecticut, they're pretty much getting their bags packed to head to Houston. We'll leave it there on that front and hanging out the Eastern Conference. Western Conference. Well, who's on the top of the list is the champions Las Vegas Aces, the dynastic team of this decade for the W. Asia Wilson picking up where she left off. Jackie Young and all the crew. They too have made some nice changes, and I think Las Vegas is going to be a very interesting team to watch. As time goes on. I mean, Candy Carter, my gosh, oh my god, like you talking about getting some offensive punch. What, like when you talk about Jewel Lloyd, Jackie Young, you still got Gray out there doing her thing, and then you throw in Candy Carter, Candy Carter, who's just like a mini, like she's like the female version of microwave Vinnie Johnson. Like she comes out there and she's on a heater the moment she gets out there. So Las Vegas, man, they're going to be something to deal with. They're 4-2 at the moment. Ironically, the two losses are at home, which is strange. They're 4-0 on the road, so that's interesting. Minnesota, without Collier, there's still a handful to deal with. And let me tell you something, that rookie, I know Kiki's going to be in the mix for Rookie of the Year. Flage is going to probably be in there as well, too. She's averaging about 11 a game, But I must admit, boy, oh my gosh, watching Miles, man. Hey, I always got a soft spot for players that got goggles. So watching a goggles player back in the league, and her vision and her ability to push the ball, and she can make some crazy shots around the rim. She's a fun to watch, man. When you get her connected with Collier, with the rest of that group, with Courtney Williams, and of course my girl, Clutch McBride, Minnesota, it'll definitely be there at the end. They're also 4-2. This is without Collier, so watch them. Valkyries, they're humming there at 3-2. I think they're going to be another team that's going to be moving up the charts a bit this year. I think the two Western Conference teams to watch are Golden State and Dallas. Dallas has been on TV quite a bit. I guess the league also sees them as a marquee team. Obviously, the two last -- picks. Paige picking up where she left off last year. Rike seems like she's a lot more comfortable in the system this year than she was last year. I still think they need a little more help in the front court, but Dallas is a fun watch as well, too. Sparks, after a tough start, they've kind of gotten things together lately. They're now 3-3 as well, too. Kelsey Plum doing Kelsey Plum things, which is doing a lot of scoring. They still have a pretty nice big three, man. With she, NECA, and then Hamby. Like that's as good a three you can find anywhere in the league for big threes, man. So the Sparks, they got this is almost like, I would say it's Cameron Brink's rookie season, but it has a feel like that because she's missed so much time in the last 2 years. But she's starting to kind of find her way coming off the bench. I think eventually she will be starting again. But if she could get things moving, she's definitely become that defensive presence they've been hoping she would be. So watch out for them. I mentioned Portland's already at 5-5. Phoenix, not surprising in this way, they've lost a lot of players, even though they still have Copper, my girl Copper, and they still have, of course, Thomas. I think they've lost a lot with Sabali gone, so 2-4 at the moment. They're still in the mix, but and Seattle at 2-4 as well too. That's a good young team there to watch. As I said before, I'm looking forward to watching more Seattle games with Flage. But the Western Conference, I think, is a two-team race. I think it's different tiers where I see Aces and Lynx as we're fighting for that top spot, and there's a different level where we get the Valkyries, Wings, and Sparks in my mind. And then I think I think Phoenix could work their way back into that mix as well too. And I think Portland and Seattle might be kind of the bottom when it's all said and done. But the W's off to a great start. The ratings have been great, just for folks who are into that. And I think overall the league, obviously with the deal being done, it's in the healthiest place it's ever been as a league. We have Houston coming into the league next year to kind of bring back some of that nostalgia and to tie that back together with the history of the league. It's important to have when teams that have won championships and dynastic teams for that matter. You don't want to lose those teams in your league or those locations. So it's good to have Houston back. Unfortunately, it's on Connecticut's dime, which that sucks. I was kind of hoping at least Connecticut to stay in the New England area, be it in Hartford or Boston, but I went through that mess in the offseason. And Houston ended up being the winner of that. We'll see if Boston ends up getting a team later on. But yeah, that's it for what I have right now. Looking forward to seeing it. I've said before, I'm going to try to get to a Temple game this summer. Great to see the W back up and running. Folks, give me your thoughts below. Who you like right now early in the season. Who you think right now is in a little bit of trouble early in the season. Love to get your thoughts in the comments down below. One last thing to mention too. I'm going to kind of just seed this in over time. But hey, just want to mention, you check down below. There's a link down there to a new Beyond the Locker Room merchandise shop. Merch store. And it's www.beyondlockerroom.store. Check it out if you have a chance. Unisex. Got a lot of t-shirts for all types of styles that you like. In this case, or all types of different phrasing and designs. So, hey man, it's like, as I like to say, rep the mindset, wear the gear. Check it out if you have a chance. As I said before, I always appreciate the support you guys give. Love the commentary. You guys are watching the videos. Appreciate it. Try to continue to do different stuff for you guys. Touch on some different sports perhaps as time goes on. Obviously, we're in the hoops world right now, in the hoops vortex. But, as we get more into the summer, I'll spread out the different sports. But once again, thanks everybody for the support. As always, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me... Oh, by the way, the store is actually on the shop buttons on Facebook and Instagram as well too. You can find me on Twitter or X now. Sorry, X. I still call it the Bird app, and also Blue Sky. And you can find me right here on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Said before, subscribe for free. In these days, and you get anything for free, that's good stuff. Anyway, guys, as always, be safe. Keep it locked, and we'll talk next time. Peace.